I wasn't always a man with everything. In fact, growing up, life seemed to stack every possible challenge against me. My parents worked tirelessly, barely managing to keep the lights on and food on the table. From an early age, I learned the value of hard work and sacrifice. I remember days when all we had to eat were beans and rice, yet my parents would insist we sit together at the table, pretending it was a feast. They taught me that family is built on love, not luxury, and those lessons shaped who I became. By the time I turned 18, my father's health began to deteriorate. It was up to me to step in and help support my family. I got a job at a local repair shop, working long hours while my peers went off to college. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved the satisfaction of fixing things, of bringing broken machines back to life. I quickly learned the trade and rose to become one of the most reliable mechanics in our small town. Yet, beneath my success, there was always a part of me that longed for more, a family of my own to pour my love and effort into. When I met April, everything changed. She was unlike anyone I'd ever known, kind, intelligent, and stunningly beautiful. Her smile could light up a room, and her laugh had a way of melting away the stress of even the hardest days. We fell in love quickly, and before I knew it, we were walking down the aisle, promising to stand by each other forever. I thought I'd found the partner who would share in my dreams, my struggles, and my triumphs. Together, we built a life that I was proud of. A house full of laughter, 2 incredible sons, and a future that seemed as bright as the sun. I devoted myself to being the husband and father I'd always dreamed of becoming. I worked tirelessly to provide, never questioning the sacrifices because I believed in what we had. Yet, as time would cruelly reveal, even the strongest foundations can crumble when cracks go unnoticed. Seemingly trivial details can unravel even the grandest plans. Take, for example, the Challenger shuttle tragedy of 1986, where a simple, inexpensive O-ring led to catastrophic failure, claiming lives and causing monumental losses. Similarly, a clot no bigger than a grain of sand can halt blood flow to the brain, resulting in end of life. A seemingly harmless icy patch on the road can spin a car out of control, leading to tragedy. Life is full of such moments, tiny overlooked factors with the power to bring monumental consequences. Reflecting on these, I can't help but draw a parallel to my own life. Would you call marriage a significant undertaking? I would. My marriage is deeply important to me. I've been married for just over 8 years to a wonderful woman named April. Together, we have 2 great sons, Chris and Charles. Chris carries my name, and Charles is named after my father. We live in a comfortable house ideal for a growing family. Though I didn't graduate from college, I've built a good career as a mechanic. My skills have provided us a stable and happy life. The long hours are worth it for what I earn. I've always viewed my marriage as the highlight of my life. Providing for my family has been my proudest responsibility, one I've taken very seriously. Yet, small things ended my marriage. In my case, it was a tiny blood vessel in my brain that was too close to another. At some point, it swelled and made contact, triggering a migraine. That day, it struck suddenly. The usual symptoms came on: painful sensitivity to light, overwhelming sounds, and awful smells. It was blinding and hit without warning. I recognized it immediately. The trouble was, I didn't have my Imitrex inhaler with me. Without it, there was no quick way to stop or ease the pain. The pills I had were less effective and slow to work. The pain was so severe I couldn't keep working. I stumbled into my boss's office and explained the situation. Alarmed, he called his secretary, Penny, and told her, "Get him home now. Don't let him drive. Go and hurry." Penny and my boss helped me out of the office. Penny walked me outside and leaned me against a wall while she fetched her car. With my eyes shut against the light and my hands pressed to my temples, I waited, trying to dull the pain. Once in the car, I leaned back and shut everything out. The pain was worsening. Light blinded me, sounds buzzed unbearably, and smells churned my stomach. Thankfully, Penny knew where I lived, so I didn't need to give her directions. Though it felt like forever, we finally arrived. Penny helped me into the house and guided me to the kitchen. There, I directed her to the refrigerator to find my inhaler. She placed it in my hand, steadying it as I used it. I inhaled the medication, and within moments, it began working through my system. I asked Penny to help me to the living room so I could lie on the sofa. She closed the blinds, turned off the lights, and stayed until I told her I felt the relief beginning. Then she left, after I thanked her for driving me home. Silence enveloped the room, and I must have fallen asleep quickly as the pain faded. When I woke up, voices filled the room. It was dark, and I remembered where I was. The pain was gone, though I still felt weak. A lingering aftermath of the migraine. Sitting up slowly, I listened and recognized the voices of my wife, April, and our neighbor, Robin. They must not have known I was there since the lights were off. Perhaps April assumed I'd come home late and let me sleep in. But no, my car wasn't in the driveway. She probably had no idea I was home. I thought about surprising them both. I stood up, ready to tiptoe toward the door and surprise them, but then I started focusing on their conversation. "Come on, April, how was it? Was it as good as before?" "Spill the details, girl," Robin urged eagerly. April chuckled softly. "It was incredible. I felt like I was in heaven. This time it was even better than before. Honestly, it was mind-blowing, the best sex I've ever had." Robin gasped. "Better than with Chris? Better than your husband?" "Hell yes," April replied without hesitation. "I love Chris to end of life, but he never made me feel like that. Never. And of course, I never let him do things like that. He'd think I was some kind of strumpet if I did." Robin laughed nervously. "So does that mean Carl thinks you're a strumpet?" April smirked. "Of course, but I'm his strumpet and I like it. God, I can't wait for next time." Robin's tone grew more serious. "Aren't you scared Chris will find out? What would he do? Have you thought this through? You're taking a huge risk." April shrugged. "Chris will never find out. And even if he did, so what? He wouldn't do anything. He's too nice, and he'd forgive me. He'd never divorce me because he wouldn't risk losing the kids. He loves them too much. He knows I'd take them away in a heartbeat with the right lawyer. He'd be finished." Robin sounded worried. "That doesn't sound like you, April. I've never heard you talk about Chris like that. How can you say you love him and still say things like this? You're scaring me. I think you're making a big mistake." "I really do." April's voice dropped. "I do love Chris. I really do. But I don't want to end things with Carl either. I want both. The love I get from Chris and the sex I get from Carl. I need both, and I'm not giving it up." I had heard enough. My migraine had vanished, but the pain in my chest was far worse. It hit so hard my stomach clenched, my breath caught, and a ringing filled my ears. Blood pounded in my head, and I thought I might have a heart attack. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself until my body calmed down. Even then, I didn't let them know I was there. As my control returned, anger surged inside me, building to the point where I thought I might explode. I stood tall, raised my head, and walked into the kitchen. Silence fell instantly. Robin noticed me first. Her eyes widened, and her mouth dropped open in a shocked, "Oh." She covered her mouth with her hand, whispering, "Oh my God." April turned to see what Robin was looking at and froze when she saw me. Her expression shifted, satisfaction to shock, then fear, and finally anger, all in a moment. She pushed back her chair and stood, facing me. "How much did you hear?" she demanded. "Why the hell were you hiding there, spying on me?" I stared at her silently. My eyes flicked to Robin, who immediately stood up and said, "I should go. Pete and I will keep the boys if you don't come get them. I'll call you later." With that, she bolted out the side door. I watched her leave without saying a word. Then I turned back to April. My mind raced as I looked at the woman I had loved unconditionally for 8 years, the best years of my life. I thought we would grow old together, but now that dream was destroyed. There would be no eternity for us. She had liquidated it tonight. "Where are the boys? Where were they while you were busy having fun with your lover?" I asked, my voice calm but sharp. "Did you even think about them? Or were you too wrapped up in the thrill of cheating to care?" April's face twisted with anger, distorting her beauty. "The boys are with Carly. Robin and I went shopping, and Pete was watching them. And I wasn't with anyone else, just Robin," she said defiantly, as if she had won an argument. Her smug expression faded as reality dawned on her. "What are you even doing home? Where's your car? Why were you sitting in the dark? Were you spying on me? Trying to catch me in something?" "I came home early with a terrible migraine. George had Penny drive me home because I couldn't handle the light. I took my Imitrex and fell asleep. I've been here since then," I said flatly. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I felt like I was going to vomit. "Your voices woke me up, and what I heard made me sick. I need to go to the bathroom," I said as I rushed off. I knelt by the toilet, trying to empty my stomach. My body convulsed, but nothing came up. I sat there on the bathroom floor, pressing my face to the cool porcelain as I slowly began to relax. My stomach finally settled, and my breathing normalized. When I was ready, I returned to the kitchen. April sat at the table, staring out the window. "I'm going to pick up the boys. I'll put them to bed tonight," I said coldly. Without waiting for a response, I walked out the door and headed to the Andersons' house next door. Pete and Robin Anderson were our closest neighbors and best friends. Many evenings were spent together at each other's houses, sharing stories and drinks. Best friends, what a bitter thought. I wondered how much Pete knew. Should I ask? I climbed their back steps, knocked twice, and stepped inside. Robin sat at the kitchen table with a coffee cup in front of her, talking to Pete. I could tell she had told him. His expression was one of pity, while hers was pure fear. "I'm here to pick up the boys. Are they ready to go home?" I asked, walking past Pete into the living room, where I assumed the boys were playing with Carly, the Andersons' teenage daughter. Sure enough, they were working on a puzzle, while Carly watched. She greeted me with a smile as I entered. "Hi, Mr. Phillips. Are you here for the boys?" When I nodded, she said, "I'll grab their jackets." I watched the scene before me and felt a deep sadness. Small, beautiful moments like this were the real sufferers of betrayal. The everyday joys of family life were shattered by adult selfishness, leaving permanent scars. I had no doubt this was one of those moments. "Thanks, Carly. I'll be in the kitchen when they're ready." I returned to the kitchen where Pete and Robin still sat. I looked at Robin, then at Pete. "Did you know? Did you both know she cheated on me? Pete, how did it feel knowing this while we were together? Did it give you some twisted thrill?" My voice was sharp with anger, harsher than I intended, but I needed answers. I needed to know what my so-called friends had hidden from me. Pete's face darkened as he glanced angrily at Robin before addressing me. "I didn't know anything, buddy, I swear. If I had, I would have told you right away. I can't believe my wife knew and didn't tell me. That's low, damn low. You don't deserve this. I won't apologize for her, but I'll be here for you if you need me." His glare at Robin said it all, and I believed him. If Pete had known, he would have told me. This had been Robin and April's secret. I turned my attention to Robin. "Thank you, Robin. Thanks for letting me play the fool, for making me a laughingstock. Did it make you feel good, knowing what you knew and hearing her brag about it? I hope it was worth it." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Carly enter with the boys, and I forced a smile. Each boy held a cookie, but Carly's uneasy expression told me she had overheard my words. I prayed she hadn't heard much, though her face suggested otherwise. I resolved this would be the last time Robin was near my kids. I didn't know how I'd manage it, but I'd make it happen. Once home, the boys ran upstairs to get ready for dinner. I walked through the quiet kitchen into the living room where April sat alone. The room was dark, lit only by fading daylight filtering through the curtains. She sat hunched on the couch, her face pale, her eyes red and glossy from tears. The anger and defiance I'd seen earlier were gone, replaced by fear and vulnerability. But it was too late for that. Her transformation only filled me with disgust. Remorse now? Fear now. It felt staged, a calculated move in a battle for control. This wasn't regret, it was manipulation. April's face didn't convey sorrow, it radiated deceit and cunning. I shattered the silence with an icy question. "Who is he? What does he have that I don't?" She stared at me, saying nothing. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. "Who he is doesn't matter," she said softly. "This isn't about you. Chris, I'm so sorry you found out this way. I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for you to know." Her words struck me. There was no apology for her actions, no regret over her choices. Only regret that I had discovered them. I sank into the chair she had bought me for our 5th anniversary, a chair I had loved, now reduced to just another object in the room. "Let me explain," she pleaded. "This doesn't have to be the end for us. We can move forward just like before. We can make it work if you try to understand. You will do this." Her voice turned from pleading to insistence, the same tone she used when trying to get her way in arguments. I looked at her, my voice calm but firm. "Can you tell me it's over? Can you promise you'll never see him or be with him again? You will do this." My hands gripped the arms of the chair so tightly I felt the strain, keeping myself in control as tension radiated through me. April stared at me, her eyes wide and tears streaming down her cheeks, but she didn't respond. That silence was all the confirmation I needed. She wasn't going to stop. Her conversation with Robin replayed in my mind. She wanted both worlds, and she wasn't willing to give him up. She expected me to go along with it. "I guess that's your answer," I said, standing. "I'll put the boys to bed after dinner, and then we can talk about what happens next. Tomorrow, I'll move my things out of the house. I think I'll stay with my brother for a while." I walked into the kitchen, a place people instinctively go when things fall apart. Why is that? A strange thought to have while your life crumbles around you. April busied herself preparing dinner, and I took the boys to the playroom, spending an hour enjoying their laughter and the simplicity of their joy. We were in the middle of a game when April called us to the table. The boys ran ahead, noisy and excited, while I directed them to the bathroom to wash their hands. It was the ordinary moments like these that kept me grounded, at least for their sake. Dinner was lively for the boys, their chatter filling the air as they enjoyed their meal and each other's company. April and I sat in silence, each lost in thought, weighed down by decisions and their consequences. After dinner, April cleaned the kitchen while I took the boys upstairs to get ready for bed. We read a couple of stories, laughed a little, and finally they settled in. I stood in the doorway, watching as they pulled their blankets up to their necks, ready to drift into sleep. My eyes stung, and my throat tightened with grief. This too would end. Downstairs, I sat in the armchair, feeling everything slip away. I loved April deeply, but her words echoed in my mind. He never made me feel this way, and I'm his strumpet. Those words had liquidated any chance of reconciliation. I couldn't unhear them. April entered the room and sat down. "We need to talk," she said. Her voice was measured, almost rehearsed. "I know you're upset, but you have to understand. What I have with Carl is just sex, just excitement. It's nothing compared to what I feel for you. I love you, not him. He's just a distraction and it will pass. But right now, I can't stop seeing him. This doesn't have to change anything between us. We can go back to how we were, if you just let this happen." Her words spilled out, one after another, but they felt hollow. "You can't stop seeing him?" I repeated. "And you expect me to allow it? Are you insane or just delusional? Either way, this ends now." She looked at me, confused and exasperated. "You're not understanding. There isn't us, Chris. There's a future. It's you and me, and this is just temporary. You can't throw everything away over this." "No, you're the one who doesn't understand," I replied. "There is no us. There's you, and there's him. That's all. This is over. Finished. There's nothing to negotiate. After 8 years of marriage, you should know me well enough to understand that I'll never agree to this." April's voice softened, pleading. "But Chris, I love you. You're the only man I've ever loved. I don't love Carl. Please, for the sake of our marriage and our family, just give me this time, please." "Take all the time you want," I said, my tone cold. "Tomorrow, I'll contact a lawyer. We'll split everything fairly, and I won't try to hurt you the way you've hurt me. I just want this to end." Exhaustion washed over me. I wanted nothing more than to go to bed and forget, even for a little while. The pain in my chest was worse than any migraine I'd ever had, and I longed for relief. But April's next words stunned me. "Then damn you," she spat. "No divorce. I'll fight you every step of the way. I'll take everything. Your house, your money, and your boys. I'll make sure you barely see them. If you try to take this from me, it'll cost you everything. And I'll still have Carl. You can't stop me." Her words hit like a slap, and suddenly everything became clear. This marriage had ended long before tonight. This wasn't sudden anger, it was calculated. She had planned for this moment, anticipating that I might find out, and rather than stop, she had prepared to destroy me. There was no love left, only greed and cruelty, a desire to humiliate me. The realization crushed any lingering hope I had for us. This wasn't the woman I loved. It never had been. I glared at April, the anger within me rising with each passing moment. Whatever smug satisfaction she had felt from her earlier words melted away as she noticed my expression. Her confidence faltered, replaced by fear. My voice sliced through the tense silence. "Here's what you need to understand, April. When you corner a rat, it fights back. It'll go to the end of life when it has no way out. You should have thought about that before pushing me this far. But now you've done it, and you'll pay for it." "Please, Chris," she pleaded, her tone desperate. "I don't want this, but I don't have a choice. I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep you from leaving us. If you won't understand and accept this, I'll fight you. I know you. You love me and the boys too much to leave. You'll stay, I know you will. Goodbye, April. Tell the boys I'll see them when I can. I'll grab a few things now and come back later to get the rest when we can agree on a time," I said, heading upstairs. I packed quickly, just the essentials. Bathroom items, a few pairs of underwear, socks, and jeans. That was all. 8 years of marriage reduced to a small bag. What remained were only bitter memories. Still, I had my 2 boys, and they were all I cared about at that moment. As I came downstairs, April was sitting by the kitchen door, clearly ready to make another attempt. "Chris, please don't do this. I'm begging you. You don't have to leave." Just tell me you'll end it with him, that you'll never see him again. We can have a chance, just tell me." "I can't. I just can't," I replied, pushing past her. I felt the rage boiling inside me, the urge to lash out physically, but I forced myself to stay in control. "I'll come by in the evenings after work to see the boys so they don't notice anything right away." With that, I opened the door and walked out. The door slammed shut behind me as I threw my bag into the back seat of my truck and climbed in. Backing out of the garage, I drove away without looking back. On the road, I called my brother Clyde. He lived about 10 miles away, alone since his wife had left him for his best friend 2 years ago. Clyde had long stopped caring about her absence. They were still technically married, but he never pursued a divorce. Instead, he drowned his sorrows in booze. Clyde and I had discussed his drinking many times, but he never changed. He wasn't an out-of-control drunk, just perpetually buzzed, enough to numb the memories, or so I figured. Clyde picked up and told me to come over. "I'll be back later," he said. When I arrived, I found the spare key under the flower pot on the porch and let myself in. As always, Clyde's house was immaculate. For all his flaws, he was compulsively neat. Seeing everything in its place felt oddly comforting. It was a sharp contrast to the wreckage of my own life. I found some beer in the fridge and made myself comfortable, taking Clyde's suggestion to relax. By the time he came home, I was pleasantly drunk. We went out to get more beer and kept drinking when we got back. I gave him the simplest explanation. April and I had fought, and I needed a place to stay. Clyde didn't press me for details. Instead, he sat with me, nursing his beer to keep me from going too far. "You're my brother," he said. "I'll always be here for you." The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a heavy heart. The hangover was my own fault, but no amount of booze could drown the pain. I dragged myself to the bathroom, letting cold water from the shower wash away the remnants of the night before. There was no sense in staying drunk. I found a note from Clyde saying he'd gone to work and would check in with me later. Not surprising, it was Saturday, and we both worked for the same company. Our job was maintaining heavy construction equipment for contractors across the state. It was demanding, but the pay was good, enough to support my family, or so I thought. As I sat in Clyde's quiet house, I realized how much I had sacrificed to provide for that family. The big house April loved so much had been my pride, a symbol of safety and stability for all of us. But now I saw it differently. To her, it was leverage. She saw it as a weapon she could use in a divorce, a way to secure the money I earned while she indulged her affair. I thought about the house she was so proud of, about the money I worked so hard to earn. To me, it had always been about honoring and cherishing my family. To her, it was a tool, a place to flaunt new lingerie bought for another man. The realization made me sick. Everything I'd built for us was just another piece of her betrayal. I turned the water up higher, letting the sound drown out my thoughts, even though I was running late. I needed to get out of here and go to work, a place where I could think clearly, make plans, and decide on the things I couldn't process now. April had already thought this through. Her words from last night made it obvious that she had planned everything, anticipating my shock and inability to think straight when I found out about her betrayal. She had strategized her moves, building a divorce plan to take everything from me, to manipulate the situation so it looked like I was at fault if I didn't agree to her affair, and to frame me as the bad guy for not approving of her fun with another man. She thought she was clever, stacking the deck in her favor, cornering me, and forcing me to accept her infidelity. She had a good setup, and she wasn't about to let her jealous husband ruin it. I dressed quickly and grabbed a box of large trash bags. Knowing she'd be out that morning to take the boys to her mother's, I drove to the house and went inside. I emptied my closet and drawers, throwing everything into trash bags. I collected my bathroom items, stuffed them into a smaller bag, and carried everything to my truck. Tossing the bags into the back seat, I returned to the house, determined not to leave just yet. I planned to come back after work to see the boys. I had too much to think about and too many decisions to make. One thing was certain, my marriage was over. I would never touch April again. She was no longer my wife, my lover, or my confidant. She had chosen to be someone else's lover, and that's all she would ever be now. The thought hit me hard, and tears welled up. I sat down on the floor of what used to be our bedroom and let the grief take over, crying for the loss of the life I thought we had. At work, I buried myself in tasks, channeling all my energy into repairs. I didn't stop, not even during lunch. I was relieved to escape thoughts of home, my wife, and my kids, losing myself in fuel injectors, timing chains, and broken drivetrains. I tackled the hardest jobs without hesitation, working like a man possessed. 10 hours passed before Clyde tapped me on the shoulder, pulling me out of my trance. "Hey man, take a break." "Seriously, you're making the rest of us look lazy," Clyde said, standing there with a mix of concern and disbelief. I looked up at him, exhausted. "Sorry, little brother. Just trying to bury myself in work, trying to forget. I didn't mean to overdo it." Clyde must have noticed the raw emotion on my face because he grabbed my elbow and led me to the break area. Clyde and I had always been close, especially after losing our parents in a car accident 10 years ago. He'd been my best man 8 years ago, and he was the godfather to my boys, Chris Jr. and Charlie. He knew when something was wrong. I slumped into a chair while Clyde handed me a steaming cup of coffee. It tasted bland, but the warmth was grounding. "Okay," he said, sitting across from me. "Talk. Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out. Start from the beginning." I didn't hold back. For 10 minutes straight, I spilled everything to Clyde, every detail of the shame, humiliation, and contempt April had thrown at me. I told him about her threats to take everything, her smug confidence that I wouldn't fight back, and how she tried to make it impossible for me to stop her or retaliate without losing everything. She wanted me to surrender and accept her affair as part of our life. I described the look on her face when she talked about her lover to Robin, the smug satisfaction as she described how amazing it was. I told him about her threats to use the house, the kids, and her leverage to destroy me if I didn't comply. The disdain in her expression when she warned me she'd take everything was seared into my memory. She made it clear her lover was more important than anything else, and she had no intention of giving him up. Clyde listened silently, his expression hardening as I spoke. By the time I finished, I felt empty, drained, and angry all over again. Clyde was stunned. He had always thought of April as a good woman and a caring mother. His brother had never hinted at any marital issues, and Clyde had assumed their relationship was solid. Now this. He looked at Chris, seeing the pain and heartbreak etched into his face. It was hard to witness. Chris was a good man, a devoted father, and a reliable provider. At the garage, everyone knew they could count on him. He had helped more than his fair share over the years. Clyde's shock turned into anger. How could she do this to him? What was wrong with her? His anger boiled as he watched his brother and closest friend broken and defeated. "Chris, listen," Clyde said, his voice low but firm. "You're not going to just take this, are you? You have to do something. Let me and the guys help. You don't deserve this." His concern was clear, and I felt it. I looked up at him, hopeless. What can I do? If I divorce her, she'll take everything. Child support, money for the house, the car, everything. You know I'd never take anything away from my boys. She's using them against me, Clyde. She knows I won't hurt them, and now some idiot who thinks it's fine to sleep with another man's wife will end up taking my place. I'm stuck. Clyde growled. To hell with both of them. I loved April like a sister, but now she's made her choice and she'll have to live with it. We need to go after them both. First, we figure out who this guy is. That's the easy part. Let me make some calls, and then we'll talk. I shrugged, skeptical. Fine, but I don't see how it helps. She won't tell me anything about him. Clyde smirked. Doesn't matter. We'll find him, and he'll wish we hadn't. You know there's no getting April back, right? After this, there's no respect left. If you stay, she'll never respect you again. She's someone else's toy now. For a moment, I was taken aback, but then a faint smile crept across my face. You're right. She's not my wife anymore. Last night, I learned how quickly love can turn into hate. And today, my hate for her is stronger than the love I once had. She turned it into something that will come back to haunt her. We talked a little more before finishing work. For once, there was no overtime. Instead, we headed to a nearby bar. This wasn't a night for drinking. It was for planning. Clyde made a few calls while the rest of us talked. I was surprised by the support I received from my friends. They didn't need details. They just wanted to know how they could help. Together, we came up with a plan. At 7 p.m., I pulled into my driveway and walked into the house. Funny, I thought as I stepped inside. This wasn't my home anymore. Just a building. I went to the kitchen, shrugged off my jacket, and moved into the living room. There was April, sitting in her chair, watching Chris and Charlie play a video game. The scene etched itself into my mind. I looked at her as she glanced at me. A faint smile played on her lips, but now I understood its meaning. Contempt. She held contempt for me, for our family, for everything we'd built. It was all a lie. A massive lie, and she was the liar. My gaze turned cold, and when she saw it, her smile faltered, and she looked away. Back in the kitchen, I grabbed some leftover fried chicken and mashed potatoes from the fridge. I wasn't hungry, but I needed to occupy myself. I had planned to talk to the boys before bed, but Clyde convinced me to hold off. That conversation would come soon enough, and it would mark the first step in a fight I knew I wouldn't win. But I'd go down swinging. I sat at the table, eating slowly. The food had no taste, but I needed to keep my strength up. Halfway through the meal, April came in and sat across from me. "Have you calmed down after last night? Can we talk like civilized adults now?" she asked. I looked at her incredulous. Civilized adults? Like a cheating wife and her humiliated husband? That seems more realistic. But instead of saying it aloud, I stayed silent. "So, you're just going to sit there and sulk?" she pressed. "I expected more from you, Chris. We need to think about the kids now. You need to remember your role as their father." I stared at her, my voice calm and even. Am I their father? That's something I'm starting to question. Maybe I should get some tests done. Her face darkened with anger and she opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "Careful, April. The kids might hear you if you start shouting. Remember them? The same kids you accused me of forgetting last night? Now it's your turn to think about them. Think about what you've done to their world. You didn't just cheat. You destroyed our family. So go ahead. Think carefully, April." April lowered her voice and hissed, "You didn't take anything I said last night seriously. I thought you'd get over it and return to your normal life. Nothing has to change here at home. I still love you, and you're still my husband. That hasn't changed. Neither you nor the children will lose anything familiar. I keep everything discreet and only do what I need to while the kids are at school and you're at work. You have nothing to lose, Chris. I'm always here for you." I didn't reply. I kept eating, slow and methodical, without breaking my expression. My face was blank, my eyes empty, giving her nothing. But the silence said everything. As I looked at her, I felt nothing. No love, no anger, just emptiness. That seemed to unnerve her. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear pass through her. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her tone more uncertain. "Are you going to make this harder than it has to be? I hoped you loved me enough to let me have this. I told you he doesn't take anything from you. I'll always be here for you. Why can't you understand?" She was growing emotional, but I just kept chewing, meeting her words with silence. Finally, I swallowed and said, "We can talk about this later. I won't have this discussion while the kids are awake. I listened to you last night. I didn't like it, but I listened. Now is not the time." April seemed calm at that. She even smiled slightly. "Thank you for this. I think you were right about some things you said, but your words hurt me. I'll take the boys to bed soon, and then we can talk." She brushed past me, placing a hand on my shoulder. I flinched instinctively, and she pulled her hand away. The disgust I felt at her touch was unmistakable. I spent time with the kids, trying to act normal despite knowing everything was about to change. I had accepted that April's actions had destroyed what we had. Part of me wondered if I should just play along, accept her terms, and wait until she finished whatever this was. After all, she claimed to love me and still wanted to stay married. But deep down, I knew I couldn't do it. Not now, not ever. It was after 9 p.m. when April came back. She sighed, dropped into a chair, and smiled. "The boys are asleep. They're getting so big now, almost too old to be put to bed. They say goodnight, but I know they turn the lights back on to read. They're good boys." I nodded. "They are good kids. It's a shame they'll have to go through this. I just don't know how to shield them from the pain." Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "Nothing has to change, Chris. Just let me have this, and we can go back to being the family we were. Be patient. It'll end soon. You won't lose anything. I love you and want to stay your wife. This is just something I need to do, that's all." I looked at her. This woman I had loved for 8 years, married because I couldn't imagine life without her. We had 2 wonderful children, a good life, until last night. Now everything was different, and she couldn't seem to grasp why I felt this way. "I wasn't planning to get into this tonight, but I need to be clear," I said. "I listened to you last night. You said you love me, that you want to stay married, and that he doesn't take anything from me. You won't tell me who he is because, as you said, it's none of my business. Then you made it clear what would happen if I filed for divorce. You threatened to take everything, including the boys. You were very clear about what you'd do." April's face darkened with anger. She didn't like hearing her own words repeated. Maybe they sounded different coming from me, but I knew she saw the truth in them. "You don't see this the way I do," she said, her tone defensive. I told you this has nothing to do with our marriage. Why can't you believe me when I say I still love you and want us to stay together? What I heard last night wasn't love, I replied, my voice firm. It was contempt. Contempt for me, for our marriage, for everything I've done for this family. When I got angry, you responded with threats. Threats you clearly thought through long before you spoke to me. You humiliated me, belittled me, and then accused me of misunderstanding you. You knew exactly how I'd react, and you already had all your answers ready. Why do you think that is? Anger crept into my voice, eroding the calm I'd been clinging to. April's defiance only fanned the flames. And here's what I realized last night, I said, my tone sharp. You backed me into a corner, thinking I had no way out. But you forgot one thing, April. Even a cornered rat will fight back against a cat when it has nothing left to lose. With those words, I stood and walked away. As I reached the kitchen door where April still sat, I stopped and turned to her. I'm going to stay somewhere else tonight, for a while. I'll come home after work so the kids don't notice anything. At least at first. Her voice trembled, desperation slipping through. What do you mean, staying somewhere else? Why not stay here? We can't fix this if you leave. Chris, don't do this. I love you and don't want to lose you. I don't know what I'll do if you leave. Please, let's work this out. There has to be a way. I met her gaze, my words deliberate and final. I'm sorry, April. The only thing I know for certain is that I don't love you anymore. Your infidelity succeeded. It eliminated all the love I had for you last night. That's the one thing I'm sure of. I don't know what comes next, but I know there's no going back. Tears filled her eyes as she pleaded. Chris, what about your vows to love and cherish me? Have you forgotten them? I looked at her, my voice steady. No, I haven't forgotten. But I also remember your vows. You swore on our wedding day to forsake all others, but you didn't. You promised to love only me, but you gave what was ours to someone else. I cared for you, loved you, kept my vows, and gave you everything I had. But it wasn't enough. You gave away what was mine, and destroyed my love for you in the process. So, yes, I can walk away. You've shattered everything, and I will leave. I left and drove to Clyde's house. He agreed to let me stay as long as I needed. I told him I just needed time to finish what I'd started. Soon it would all be over, and I could begin my new life. Over the next few days, I worked during the day and spent the evenings with my kids. But I avoided speaking to April. She tried to start conversations several times, but I walked away every time. One day she yelled after me, but I simply grabbed my keys and left without responding. At work, during a break, one of the guys came by to let Clyde know everything was ready and we'd have results in a few days. All I had to do now was wait. By the following week, nothing had changed. Each evening I returned to an increasingly tense April. The kids seemed oblivious, though Charlie asked if I was working harder than usual. When I asked what he meant, he said he hardly saw me in the evenings. I reassured him, promising we'd spend time together over the weekend. He seemed satisfied, and the moment passed. Meanwhile, April kept asking questions, but I ignored her, leaving the house as soon as she put the kids to bed. By the time she came back downstairs, I was gone. At the end of the week, Clyde joined me in the break room and handed me a folder. I gave him a questioning look, but he just shook his head. I opened the folder and read the short report. 2 pages, each bearing the same name, Carl Cummings. So that was him, a junior attorney at Lincoln, Rice & Holmes. He was 24, almost 10 years younger than me, and single. His wife had divorced him over 2 years ago. He lived in a condo, suggesting he had money. April had been to his place twice that week, staying for over an hour each time. Now I had a name and address. I knew who this man was. But what I didn't understand was what April saw in him that she didn't see in me. What did he have that was worth sacrificing a marriage? But that was no longer my problem. Maybe it would have been if she'd come to me earlier and talked about it instead of presenting her affair as something I had to accept. Now, I just needed to figure out my next move. I looked at Clyde for advice. Somehow, he seemed to be taking charge, even though it was my life falling apart. I was lucky to have him and my friends. Being a hard-working, reliable guy had earned me loyalty when I needed it most. Everything's in motion, Clyde said. The first step is tonight. I'll call you at home when it's ready. Keep your phone close. Once I call, you can let her know and end this mess. Fine. The knowledge that it was happening brought no relief. This wasn't how I wanted things to go, but April and her lover had cornered me, and this was the only way I knew to fight back. I wasn't a lawyer or a wealthy man with resources to craft some elaborate plan. I was a mechanic, a man who worked hard with his hands and provided for his family with honest labor. I loved April with everything I had, but it wasn't enough for her. Now, all I could do was fight in a way that made sense in my world. Soon, she'd understand exactly what that meant. I returned home and sat down for dinner with my family as if everything were normal. April chatted with the kids, and I answered when they asked questions, even starting a few conversations myself. Inside, I was tense, but I kept my composure. After dinner, I spent time with the boys, playing video games and helping with their homework. I looked like the typical husband and father. April, having finished the dishes, came into the room and watched. She seemed more at ease, seeing me act like my old self. She began to believe everything would be fine. While I was playing with my sons, Carl Cummings left his office and headed to his car, ready to drive to his apartment across town. He thought about his last meeting with April 2 days ago at his place, how wild she'd been. She'd even gone further than before, doing something new to please him. When he asked why, she said her husband had found out. Carl had been shocked, but she reassured him it wasn't an issue. It struck him as strange, but knowing her husband was aware somehow made her behavior more thrilling. For Carl, it was the best sex yet, so he didn't question it further. As he approached the alley leading to the parking lot, Carl felt a jolt and stumbled, nearly falling. Before he could recover, someone grabbed his arms and dragged him into the alley toward a courtyard. At the end, 2 men pressed him against a building wall, each holding one of his arms. Their faces were hidden behind black ski masks, and their size alone filled Carl with fear. He wasn't rich and didn't carry much cash, so he couldn't figure out what they wanted. A 3rd man stepped forward, also masked and wearing gloves. He grabbed Carl's chin, forcing him to look up. "You know a woman named April Phillips, a-hole?" the man growled. Hearing her name sent a chill down Carl's spine. Oh, crap. Her husband. Jesus Christ. He panicked. I don't know anyone by that name, he stammered, shaking as he tried to deny it. The man delivered a sharp punch to Carl's ribs, knocking the wind out of him and sending stars across his vision. The pain was excruciating, and Carl couldn't hide his fear. "I'll ask you again, do you know a woman named April Phillips?" the man repeated coldly. Realizing denial wouldn't save him, Carl gave in. "Yes," he gasped. "I know her. Please, just let me go. You will never see or speak to her again. Do you understand me?" The man's tone was icy, leaving no room for argument. "Yes, I understand," Carl choked out. He clung to the hope that this was just a warning, that they'd let him go. But the man leaned closer. "We don't think someone like you, messing with another man's wife, is very bright, so we'll make sure you understand." Carl was pushed back forcefully, leaving him in pain and unable to respond as they made sure he understood the consequences of his actions. He tried to scream, but a punch to his jaw silenced him. The pain overwhelmed him as more hits followed, and soon he lost consciousness. When Carl woke up, he was slumped against the wall, his body screaming in pain. The masked men were still there, and one grabbed his face roughly. "Listen carefully," the man said. "You will tell her this exactly. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Phillips. It was my mistake, and I regret it. I will never see or speak to you again. I will have no contact with you or your children. I'm sorry I ever met you. Goodbye." "Got it?" Carl nodded weakly. They repeated the message several times, making sure he memorized it. "If you screw this up," the leader warned, "you'll pay double." Then they left him battered and broken. Hours later, Carl woke in the emergency room at Memorial Hospital. His injuries weren't life-threatening, but he was admitted for observation. Pumped with painkillers, he felt slightly numb, though the throbbing in his ribs and jaw remained. He muttered thanks for surviving, but couldn't stop replaying the words he'd been forced to memorize. He was terrified of messing it up when April called. At home, my phone buzzed just after 8 p.m. while I was with the boys. I excused myself and stepped into another room to answer. It was Clyde. "It's done. Lesson 1 completed. He's in the hospital," Clyde said briefly before hanging up. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. Returning to the living room, I smiled slightly. April noticed and seemed relieved, assuming my mood had improved. Later, after putting the kids to bed, she came downstairs. I gestured for her to sit across from me. "We need to talk," I said evenly. April poured herself a cup of coffee and sat, her expression both hopeful and cautious. "You seem more at ease," she said. "I'm so glad. I was so scared I'd lose you, Chris. That would break my heart. I know you don't believe me, but I love you so much. I can't lose you over something so trivial compared to what we have. You should know that." I listened silently as April spoke, my emotions churning beneath the surface. Even now, I couldn't deny her beauty, the woman I had once planned to grow old with. But her words and her betrayal had destroyed everything we'd built. It was time to end the facade. April, I began, my voice firm, I have something to tell you, and I want you to listen carefully. She nodded, hesitantly, her unease evident. I know your lover's name is Carl Cummings. He's a junior associate at Lincoln, Rice & Holmes. I know everything about him. I know you've seen him twice this week. Her face went pale, and she opened her mouth to protest, but I raised a hand to stop her. That's the problem, I continued coldly. You threatened me with divorce. When I got angry, you threatened to take everything from me. Your exact words are burned into my brain. I'll take everything you have. You destroyed our marriage with those words, April. You left me no choice, forcing me to stand by while you slept with another man. But I told you before, cornered rats fight back. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Her body stiffened defensively. I know you told Robin that I never made you feel the way he does, that you were his strumpet. I'm not sorry that this is ending in a way you won't like. Mr. Cummings has been informed, very clearly, that his time with you is over. He will never see you or speak to you again. April's eyes widened in shock as I pressed on. I'm filing for divorce. There will be no alimony. I'll pay child support and my sons will have everything they need as long as you care for them. But you will work for anything you want for yourself. The papers are already in motion. You'll be served soon. She shot to her feet, her face twisting with anger. You're crazy if you think I'll agree to this. I told you I'd take you to the cleaners, and I will, she yelled. I smiled faintly, unnerving her. Why don't you call Mr. Cummings right now? Let's see what he says. Oh, wait. You might have to call the hospital. That call I got earlier? It was about him. He's in the emergency room at Memorial. Go ahead. Use my phone. I have his number. Her expression turned to horror. What have you done? What did you do to Carl? She demanded. I shrugged. I've been here all evening. Why do you think I did anything? You made it clear that this didn't concern me. My face remained calm, but I knew it would terrify her. April had never seen me like this. I'd always been mild-mannered, calm, the kind of man who couldn't even bring himself to physically discipline the kids, leaving that to her. But now she saw someone different, a man with cold, hard eyes and a face devoid of feeling. She left the room and I heard her talking on the phone. When she returned, tears streamed down her face as she collapsed into a chair, staring blankly. I calmly picked up the newspaper, knowing exactly what she had heard. Her lover had ended it. He had no choice. Either he left her or faced the consequences promised by the 3 men who had confronted him after work. They had made sure he understood. April wiped her tears and took a shaky breath. Well, it looks like you won. Carl said he never wants to see me again. He told me he'd send all my things back and said he regrets everything. He doesn't want to talk to me anymore. I set down the newspaper and stood. Then I guess you have nothing to worry about. My lawyer will handle the rest. This will be over soon. I started toward the door but stopped. I'll talk to the boys this weekend and explain why we're divorcing. Maybe they're old enough to understand. If not, they'll grow up and figure it out. I glanced back to see her sobbing, her face buried in her hands. If I remember correctly, I said, my voice dripping with bitterness, you told me this was just something that would pass and we'd go back to normal. Well, April, you're still young and beautiful. Maybe you'll find someone willing to put up with your fantasies. Someone who wants an open marriage, who doesn't mind you having your fun with other men. But that's not me. Good luck. With that, I walked out, leaving her to sit alone with her pain. Children might not understand the complexities of these situations, but adults must live with the consequences of their actions. And those consequences are harsh.